Welcome back to Flop Warming, the podcast talking all things college basketball. Today is Wednesday, so we're on the women's side of things. I'm your host, Cole Nobby. These are my colleagues, Zion Brown, Jack Linder. Guys, some great games this weekend. What stood out to you the most?
First of all, colleagues, fancy.
There you go. Just trying to be professional.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, to me, the big game of the week and the weekend was Friday night, UCLA at Oregon State. Probably the craziest game in college basketball that we'll see all year, men's or women's, throughout all season, even including the tournament, which we know that gets hectic. But the 79-77 win for Oregon State, the buzzer beater by Talia Van Oelhoffen, and just everything that went on in that game, all the lead changes at the end, it was just nuts. And seeing that on Friday night, seeing the way that game just progressed and the way the last 15 seconds of it progressed, I mean, it's one of the most enjoyable games I've watched ever, really.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, UCLA started off really on a hot streak kind of in the beginning. They were up 11-4 going into the middle of that first quarter, but then suddenly it just fell off for them completely. They went on a complete cold streak then, couldn't score the rest of the first quarter there. I believe they didn't score at all the rest of that first quarter. They ended it with 11 points, yeah. And then Oregon State is able to take that lead, and then basically from there, it's just a back and forth battle the entire rest of the game, you know? So it was I totally agree. It's a very, very entertaining game. And probably, yeah, like you said, one of the best among either men's or women's college basketball this season.
And the Pac-12 has been so fun this year. It really stinks that this is like just the end. It's coming to an end here, but it has been really exciting and really fun to watch. I know we're going to talk about some more Pac-12 stuff later down the road here today, but man, it has been just great basketball almost every single weekend in this conference, and Friday night was no different.
Yeah, speaking of the Pac-12, I was going to say, in its last year in existence, the football season was great, and now the women's college basketball season is great.
Exactly.
Going on to another Pac-12 game, another buzzer beater, Daisy Young at the buzzer, Colorado over Utah. What'd you guys think about that? Or Utah over Colorado, excuse me. What'd you guys think about that one?
Honestly considered making Colorado the flop of the week this week for me. But I mean, at that point, when you're on the road, you're keeping the game that close, you know, especially against a ranked opponent. I don't blame Colorado too much for that final loss. I mean, they had the lead with a second left to go on the clock, you know. I mean, like you said, Daisy Young just coming up clutch with the buzzer beater. You got to give props to Utah, and you got to give props to Young for coming up in the clutch in that final moment right there. That's a huge win for that team and a really, really good Utah team.
Yeah, this Utah team is just very poised, you know. I don't think they're the best in the Pac-12 necessarily, just because of how great that conference is, but they can beat anybody in that conference, and they've showed it now. Now they're up to the 18th ranked team in the country. They're one of 6 teams ranked in the top 18 of the Pac-12, and that's not to mention, you know, a decent squad in Washington State as well. But it was just another fun game in this conference, and Young, like you said, just coming off the bench, having a great game, and then hitting the buzzer beater when it mattered the most, gave them a really quality win that kind of inches them higher now that we're so close to the end of the regular season. It's all bracket talk. And so that inches them higher toward, you know, maybe being a 5 or potentially a 4 seed that can maybe host games down the line. So it's a great win for Utah to get, you know, to win this game at home. They needed it, and they beat a really good Colorado team.
And like I was saying earlier, you got to give props to Colorado in that moment because they're down a decent amount there at half. I'm trying to remember. So they only had 24 points at the half. And so
they were down by 15 at half.
15 at half. That's a big comeback, especially for how the game ended ultimately at the end. To have, like I said, to have that lead going into the final second, especially after that first half ends, that's a huge comeback for them, you know. So I don't really blame them too much for that loss.
Our last game on the monitor, we go to ACC play, NC State at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, a team that has historically been great, and this year they've done nothing but beat bad teams and lose to good teams. What do you guys think about NC State kind of dominating on the road at Notre Dame?
I think you captured it perfectly with Notre Dame. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to call this team a bad team because they're not that, but just like when you look at them against the rest of the ACC or the rest of the national powerhouses, this just isn't a year where you look at Notre Dame and say they're going to, you know, make some sort of deep tournament run or anything like that. And it stinks, you know, without Olivia Miles, who was their best player a year ago, got hurt late in the season, I believe in the ACC tournament, and now likely will not play this season. You know, if you look at this team, you say this was a roster constructed around her and with her. This is probably a top 10, maybe a top 5 team in the entire country, but they just haven't proven, especially throughout ACC play, that they're good enough to compete with teams like NC State and to really do what they need to do to score enough. You know, 43 points in a game like this, you're just never going to win against NC State scoring 43 points. So they've shown they're just not good enough. They don't have enough scoring talent to really compete in these high quality games against teams like NC State. And NC State continues to prove why they're the highest ranked team in that ACC right now.
Yeah, I mean, you guys hit the nail on the head with this one. I mean, like you said earlier, Zion, it's only 3 points, only three pointers for Notre Dame. Like that's not going to win you a ball game right there. 26.9% just overall from the floor. It's just, I mean, that's ultimately what this game came down to. It's just Notre Dame could not put the ball in the bucket at that point.
All right, moving on to our next segment, the flop of the week. This is where we talk about a team or player that just did not meet expectations. Jack, I'll start with you. Who is your flop of this past week?
I'm going with Texas Tech for this one for this week. You know, they had a rough week at the beginning of this week. They took a road loss to number 23 Baylor, 61-32. I mean, you want to talk about not being able to put the ball in the bucket. I mean, 32 points, only 29% from the field, 4 3-pointers, and 29 turnovers from Texas Tech. That's just simply not going to win you ball games right there if you keep turning over the ball like that. You know, it's so that loss right there will extend Texas Tech to a 5-game losing streak. They're 16-12 overall and 10th in the Big 12, which is honestly just so shocking for me personally because the season started off with so much promise for this team. You know, they started an 11-game win streak to start this season off, and now it's just completely fallen apart ever since late December, and it just keeps getting worse for them. So they're looking to get out of the funk right now against number 5 Texas, but it's going to be a tough one for them if they can't beat a number 23 Baylor.
Yeah, you talk about those Red Raiders, and I mean it's a team that scheduled light towards the beginning of the season, which helped them to that 11-game win streak. You know, I think their best win in that stretch was probably against Santa Clara, who's second right now in the WCC. So, you know, they scheduled light, and it proved to kind of be a bit fraudulent or a bit misleading, the fact that they started 11-0. And right now, if the season ends today, this isn't a tournament team. And like you said, it's been really disappointing. For my flop, I'm going to go with the team that will be a tournament team still, but is certainly not looking as promising as they should be, and that is the hometown Indiana Hoosiers, number 14 in the country. That will surely fall after this week. Well, maybe not surely. We'll see what happens tomorrow night, but it's looking like something that will fall this upcoming week, and that is because they just lost by 20 points at Illinois. And Illinois is playing good basketball as of late. They're playing great team ball as of late, but they're still not a team that you should go into in that environment, which wasn't great. It was Tuesday on President's Day, even though, you know, President's Day is barely even celebrated at I think at most college campuses. And that's not a game you should lose by 20. And it looked like a sleepy 2 p.m. Monday night or Monday afternoon game. Yeah. IU was 6 of 20 from 3, and this is a Hoosier team that almost, I don't want to say lives and dies by the 3, but so much of what they do is predicated off of everybody space out around Mackenzie Holmes, and we are going to knock down these 3s. And the issue is that when they don't make them, it gets dangerous and it gets scary. And this IU team has had troubles with Illinois now for 2 years now. And it was just Illinois continuing to get into the paint and get to the teeth of the Indiana defense and doing whatever they wanted inside. They had 42 points inside, also shot another 24 free throws, which typically means you were getting inside and getting fouled there too. And IU was exactly right there on the edge when the top 16 bracket came out. The review they do a few weeks before the season ends, but that loss jeopardizes their chance to be a top 4 seed and to host in the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. They need a really strong stretch here if they want that to happen, because we have seen this team, they're undefeated still in Assembly Hall. We've seen what they've been away from Assembly Hall, which isn't bad, but obviously just not as good. If this team wants to make another run to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, it's going to be tough if they don't get to do it in Assembly Hall.
Yeah, an Indiana team that's probably looking ahead a little bit to Thursday's matchup against Iowa, which we'll talk about later. My flop of the week was Yale. Yale, not a great team. Nobody expected them to beat Princeton, who's leading the league, hasn't lost a game in the Ivy League yet. But how do you how do you get beat by 45 points in a conference game? I mean, how is that possible?
At home.
They never broke double digits. Yeah, at home. They never broke double digits. In Princeton, like I said, they're the best team in the Ivy League, but they're a 9 seed right now in bracketology. This is not a number 1 seed in the tournament. This is not one of the best teams in the country. And you get beat by 45 points on your home floor. That's my flop of the week. Let's go.
It almost feels unfair picking on an Ivy League team, though, doesn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, I know Princeton themselves is great, but it's still the Ivy League.
I'm glad they were probably studying before the game. They were probably getting that in, but I don't see how you can't put up 10 points in a single quarter on your home floor. I mean, by that fourth quarter, if you're not putting up double digits, then that means their backups are better than your starters. That means their 11th, 12th person on the floor is better than your starters. So that is my flop of the week. Let's go to some more uplifting teams. The fab of the week. Zion, I'll start with you. Who is your fab of last week?
I'm going with the number 5 Texas Longhorns, who it feels like they're the most slept on 5th ranked team. I never hear about this team, but it's a really good basketball team. They got a 16-point win at Houston on Wednesday, followed that up by destroying Iowa State with a 21-point win on Saturday. They're up to a 6-game winning streak, have only lost 3 times all season. All 3 of those losses are in Big 12 play, but this is a really just strong basketball team, and no one talks about it. This is a team that we could look up in a month and say, wow, they're going to be, in the Final Four. And no one ever talks about this Longhorns team in that way, in that manner. And I'm not here to declare that they will make the Final Four, but I'm saying, hey, maybe we should be giving this team who could make the Final Four more attention than we are, because I do really like this team. Now, I think the scary part, or maybe the reason why they're not getting as many eyeballs, is they're led by Madison Booker, who's a freshman. And you don't want to have to rely on a freshman necessarily down the stretch in tournament play, but she had 23 points, 7 boards, and 4 assists against Houston, then followed that up with 18 points and 10 assists against Iowa State. So she is really talented. This team was number 8 in the bracket reveal that I just referenced in reference to IU, and they're second in the Big 12 right now. They're behind Oklahoma, who was their last loss, but they'll get a chance at a rematch a week from today against the Sooners. So I really like Texas. I think we need to pay more attention to what they're doing and just how well they played.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think people should be too worried about Madison Booker having to lead this team, because a lot of freshmen have been leading a lot of different teams throughout this entire season.
Yeah. Juju Watkins, kind of the theme of the year right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Juju Watkins with USC is dominating the floor, getting 51 points. I think she's averaging close to 30 points a game right now, So nobody should really be worried about having a freshman having to lead their team. If they're good enough to play, they can lead the team, My fab of the week for this week is going to be Virginia Tech. They had a fantastic week coming into this week. They were on a pretty good win streak there, but they started off the week by getting revenge on the Duke Blue Devils in a home game, 61-56 there. Elizabeth Kitley, 35 points, 12 rebounds, and 1 assist. I mean, the senior center, she just played all 40 minutes of the game, and she just absolutely dominated, led her team to that victory right there. And then it just proceeded to get better for them throughout the rest of the week. They went on the road again on Sunday against number 20 Louisville, and just basically took care of business on the road. Super impressive win. 65% from the floor, 43.5% from 3. They just literally could not miss beyond the arc, and 21 assists, which for me is the big key right there. Very selfless basketball from this team. And once again, Elizabeth Kitley just leading the charge right there. 26 points, 13 rebounds, and 2 assists. And Georgia Moore also with 23 points, 4 rebounds, and 10 assists. So it just really didn't matter, for me personally, if it's a number 2 or if it's a number 20 team. Yeah. If you can beat a ranked opponent on the road like that, that's a huge win.
I gave a lot of praise to this VT team and Elizabeth Kitley last week on the show, and Jack Cole. I think I'm about a week or 2 away from making some declarations about this team. They made the Final Four. I'm going to repeat what I said a week ago. They made the Final Four last year and almost beat LSU. We could very well be talking about a national champion Virginia Tech team if a couple of things had bounced differently a year ago. I know they didn't start maybe as well as we wanted to this year, but they are rolling. Elizabeth Kitley has legitimately been one of the top 3 or 4 players in the country in the month of February. And Georgia Moore, we know what she does from the outside. I mean, this team, I don't know. They feel like a team that can really make back-to-back Final Fours, and I think it's time to treat them like that, because they are really, really good.
I agree with you guys. The Virginia Tech team that's quietly leading the ACC. I mean, a very good ACC. You have NC State in there. You have Notre Dame. You have a lot of ranked teams, and they're going to get a 3-2 seed in the NCAA tournament. They're not going to have to play anybody great right out of the gate. Yeah, I agree. Virginia Tech could definitely make a run. I just want to give a quick shout out. My fab of the week being South Carolina. I feel like they don't get enough praise for how good they've been. I mean, we were talking about a team who lost 1 game last year, sent some great players to the WNBA draft, and now they're right back this year. They haven't lost a game, and everybody just comes to expect this from South Carolina. This is the best team in the country. They don't lose under Dawn Staley, and they've done it night in and night out. Dawn Staley, I want to give her flowers for appreciating all Caitlin Clark's greatness. When you've had some people in the media just wanting to bash Caitlin Clark for just probably jealousy of how good she is and how up the standard of college basketball she has this year. So I just want to give a shout out to them. Great job by South Carolina and that whole staff, continuing to win games no matter who the competition is. Let's head to our next segment, our mid-major talk. Some great mid-majors this week. Who's your guys' favorite mid-major game to watch?
I'm going to go ahead and piggyback on your talk earlier about Yale, because this game, I don't think we quite realized how just horrible this game was, in terms of from Yale's perspective, let's just say, against Princeton, number 25, conference game between numbers 1 and 6, the Tigers just absolutely brutalized the Bulldogs 70-25. Like you said earlier, did not score more than 10 points in a single quarter. The fourth quarter alone, you would hope that they would have gotten better as the game gone on, but they only scored 4 points in the entire fourth quarter. Only 4 points in the entire fourth quarter. It absolutely befuddled me. And the fact that just the Tigers put the pedal to the floor and did not let up the entire game. Princeton remains undefeated in the Ivy League, and Yale drops to 6-17 on the season. And now that you mentioned it, Zion, I do kind of feel bad, though. It is an Ivy League school. I'm harking on them a little bit too much, but it was too big of a margin of a score to not bring up.
Yeah, I mean, Princeton is just so much better than everybody in that league, and that's no slight to the rest of that league. Princeton is, they're ranked in the top 25 for a reason, but it's just so hard for a team like Yale to expect to compete with how good Princeton is. So I'm going to stray away from there. I'm going to go with Gonzaga. They just keep winning, and I don't know how. I know they're the best team in the WCC, but the WCC I mentioned has some teams like St. Mary's and Santa Clara that are good enough that theoretically you would think are good enough to knock off Gonzaga, especially if they're at home, but they haven't done it. So 20 straight wins for the Zags, 26-2 on the season. Only losses were a close overtime loss to Washington State and a loss to a Louisville team that, is a really strong team. So you're looking at a really strong Gonzaga team. I just mentioned, I keep mentioning this bracket review. I feel like I'm a broken record, but with Indiana likely dropping out of that top 16 now, I think Gonzaga is right there to host games in the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament, which for a mid-major school, that's a huge deal. So if they continue to win, they have to keep winning. At this point, they don't have any more really resume boosting sort of games. So you need them to probably win out for them to get there. But if they continue to win out, this is a team that is going to be a 3 or a 4 seed hosting NCAA tournament games, and they're just a really strong team led by Ivani Jim, who's averaging 20-9 on the year. This team is really good. They keep winning.
My mid-major, I want to give a shout out to just a couple teams leading their conference with no losses. We have Florida Gulf Coast, undefeated in their conference. Middle Tennessee, undefeated in their conference. Princeton, like we talked about, undefeated. Fairfield, undefeated. I mean, these are some teams that it's really hard to go on the road in your conference day in and day out and just not lose, not have an off day on a Tuesday night, just like we talked about with great teams like Indiana. So I just want to give a shout out to those mid-major teams. Our next segment, we're going to look a little bit ahead to this coming weekend. What is your guys' favorite game on the upcoming slate this coming weekend? Jack, I'll start with you.
I mean, I'm wearing the sweatshirt today. I'm looking forward to Iowa versus Indiana. It's an absolutely crucial game right now for Indiana. If they want to, they need this kind of confidence. This win will give them so much confidence going in to the end of the season, into the Big Ten tournament, and even going into the March Madness tournament. They need to prove that they can play with other ranked opponents. They're, like we've been talking about earlier, they came off the bad loss to Illinois, an unranked Illinois by 20 points. They're looking to recover from Iowa from earlier this year. There's so much on the line when it comes to this game. The biggest thing for them, home crowd advantage. Yeah. The crowd is going to be a huge factor in this game. And the crowd honestly needs to be a huge factor for this game. Iowa obviously looking to continue the dominance. Caitlin Clark coming off the history-making performance that she had from last game. She's going to be on top of the world coming into this game. And the Hoosiers need to establish the tone right off the bat.
And the interesting thing with this game is actually neither of these teams lead the Big Ten right now. It's Ohio State. So they both really need this game if they're going to stay in contention to win the Big Ten.
Absolutely.
And I'll get to the Buckeyes later, but just to piggyback off of that, if Indiana loses this game convincingly, I'll say convincingly, if this is a close game, it is what it is. Iowa's a great team. But if Indiana loses this game convincingly, I'm just about ready to write them off as a team that's actually dangerous to do anything in March. I mean, at some point, you have to show that you can not even win, just compete in a big game. And they haven't done that so far. I don't want to say they didn't compete against Ohio State. They did, but it just wasn't a game that once Ohio State took the lead in the third quarter, you didn't really feel like at any point IU was actually going to get it back in that game a few weeks ago. And then, of course, we saw what Iowa did to the Hoosiers in Iowa City. We saw what Stanford did out in California. So if Indiana loses this game by a lot, it's about time to turn out the lights on any huge expectations for the Hoosiers going forward. My game, it's a rematch of a game that happened a few weeks ago. It is Colorado going to USC at 10 p.m. on Friday. Colorado won this game by 4. back on January 21st. And this matchup is just so interesting to me because it's two, I don't say polar opposite teams, but they're different in the way they approach how they get their points from. Whereas USC is so reliant on Juju Watkins. Everything is run through her. She gets the ball and just told to make it happen. And then you look at Colorado. They have 3 players scoring between 13 and 15 points per game. Got another in Quay Miller at 9.6 points per game. So it's just the heliocentrism of USC. I know, big word. Big word. versus the balanced play of Colorado, kind of who wins that matchup. These two teams right now are in a 3-way tie for second in the Pac-12 with Oregon State, and of course Stanford is leading the conference, but it's such a jumble in the Pac-12. This is going to be a big one to see who separates themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like we've been talking about, even similar to the Indiana-Iowa game, for Colorado, this is a big game for them right here. They need to bounce back after such a bad loss there. Not such a bad loss on the road or anything, but again, it's a crucial game. It's going to be a tough one on the road, especially against Juju Watkins, so they need to find a way to limit the offense, and they just got to limit the offense the most is what I would say.
My game of the week coming up, I'm looking ahead to tonight, Wednesday night game, UCLA, or I believe it's tomorrow, UCLA and Utah. Utah, we talked about earlier, coming off that buzzer beater. Now they have to travel to UCLA, just a gauntlet of a schedule with the Pac-12. Two teams
never stops in that conference.
Just kind of smushed right in the middle behind the big dogs of Stanford, Oregon State. So I'm looking at that one as two good teams, not great. Which one of those teams can get a win and kind of boost their tournament resume? Let's head to the Game Balls / Player of the Week. Who did you guys think really stuck out as Players of the Week? Go ahead, Don.
I want to let Jack go first, because I think we have a similar one to start.
I mean, we have yet we talked a little bit about her, but I feel like it's time to give her flowers at this point. Caitlin Clark. She is now your women's basketball all-time points leader, currently now sitting at 3,569 career points, and honestly breaking the record in the most dominating fashion, scoring 49 points in the game versus Michigan, both a career record and a program record for most points in a game for Caitlin Clark. Broke the record by scoring Iowa's first 8 points of the game. She was just ready to get the record out of the way and just she just wanted to get it out of the way, and she wanted to get the dub, honestly. I feel like that was what her main focus was. It wasn't about getting the record or anything. It was just about getting to the win. And honestly, she did it in the first 2 minutes and 15 seconds of the game. It's just unbelievable. 8 points in the first 2 minutes and 15 seconds. And of course, just the most dominant way and Caitlin Clark way possible to break the record. A 3-pointer from the logo, probably about 30 feet out. You simply can't script something like that, If you did, people would honestly tell you that's too unrealistic. That wouldn't happen in real life, Like, that's just how insane this performance was. And again, totally deserves everything, all the praise that she's getting.
What I love about Caitlin Clark, and she is one of my game balls as well, so we share that one. What I love about Caitlin Clark is that she lives for the moment, and take the showboatiness that she has or whatever out of the picture. I know some people don't like that, but just the fact that she goes into that game knowing she's just 8 points away from getting the record, and she's like, why not just drop 49? She lives for the moment. She's never somebody who shies away from the moment or is going to be passive, and she just went out and got it. And even once she made that shot, it wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna sit back the rest of this game. No, I'll go get 40 more points just because I can, and I'm Caitlin Clark. And
she was locked in the moment that she made that shot. Like, she was ready to get back on defense, but everybody stopped the game. Like, she didn't want to stop that game. She was locked in and she was ready to keep playing.
She came in expecting that moment, as everybody did. I mean, 8 points for her is nothing, but she came in expecting that moment and still wanting to just do everything. She wanted to make the game itself a whole event, not just the moment she broke the record, but she wanted to make everything such a huge deal, and she did.
And I saw some stuff on social media. They're thinking about maybe putting something on the floor or some kind of, her footprints, her number, just something from that spot, just because it's so deep. It really doesn't interfere with the 3-point line or anything. It's more just like next to the logo.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a great idea to put something on there. I went a little bit different route. I went with the team of the week. You talked about them earlier, Gonzaga. They just won their 8th consecutive WCC regular season title. 8 consecutive. I mean, that is unheard of, a team dominating a conference like that. I know it's a mid-major conference, but Gonzaga has really came out in men's and women's and just become kind of the face of mid-major basketball. They have Coach Lisa Fortier, who has won her 20th game in a row, and her overall record is 259 and 61. I mean, she wins 30 games a year. So I just want to give a shout out to that. Zion, I know you had another game ball. Who is your signature game ball, not just Caitlin Clark?
All right, if you didn't see this, go watch the highlights because it is truly incredible. Lauren Taylor in Division II, Francis Marion, a South Carolina school, 34 points. You say, okay, 34. 44 rebounds.
Yeah.
She broke the NCAA record of 44 rebound performance. And I know what you're thinking. You probably think this is a 6'5", 6'6", or above center. She's 5'11". She got 44 rebounds as a sub 6 feet tall player. It's just jaw dropping, something you just never see. And she averages almost 15 rebounds a game, also averages 18 points. But I saw that on Thursday night, same night that Caitlin Clark set the all-time scoring record. I was just like, how in the world did that happen? So I know we don't cover Division II basketball here at all, but Lauren Taylor, props to you. You get a game ball for this week because that is nuts.
Absolutely.
That's an incredible for. I saw the stat. Just of course, I wasn't tuning into the game. I see the stat come up on Twitter, and it was like, this girl had 44 rebounds. I mean, that's like Wilt Chamberlain in his prime kind of stuff.
I saw in your notes, 14.8 rebounds per game there, and then and 18 points per game. Like, just this kind of performance is just on a completely different level, just completely going off, and again, probably the definition of just carrying your team at that point.
Really.
It's like, I'll take care of the rebounds, I'll take care of the points, don't worry.
I'm gonna shift topics a little bit since we have some time here. So excluding South Carolina, I think we all agree that South Carolina is the title favorites right now. Excluding South Carolina, who do you guys look at in that next category as teams you think are most destined to make a little bit of a run that, maybe let's just exclude the top 5. I mean, I want an underdog team that you guys think can definitely make some noise in the NCAA tournament this year.
I will say for now, LSU, I haven't always been the biggest fan. Even in the offseason, I know this precedes when we started this podcast, but I just wasn't the biggest fan of how they built this roster for this season. But it is still a team that is the defending champs. So at any moment, this team, the players that were there last year could say, okay, we know what this is like. We've been in these high pressure scenarios, these high pressure games, and we know that we have the mental fortitude to get it done. So you look at LSU, hasn't been the season that maybe they wanted. Obviously, you come into this year, you think, okay, this is the year that LSU is finally better from the start to finish in the SEC than South Carolina, and then South Carolina just doesn't lose up to this point. But I'm still looking at the Tigers as a team that, even though they're not the best, they haven't had the greatest season, I don't think anybody wants to see them, come tournament time as a 3 seed.
Yeah, similar to you, I kind of been looking at UConn, team who hasn't lost a conference game yet, but every time they've had to play the big dogs, that they've lost South Carolina pretty handily. They've lost, but with Gino Ariema still sitting there on the sideline, with Paige Becker still on the court, I think that's a team. They're number 3 in the net rankings right now, even having the 5 losses that they do because they're all great opponents. So I look at UConn. Jack, you have a team that you think is a little underdog to make a run?
We talked about them a little bit earlier, but I would go with NC State. Like we've been saying, they've been quietly going 22-3 right now. Only 3 losses in the entire season. That is impressive right there, So I would say they have the potential, they have the offensive willpower to make a run in this game, in the tournament. I'm not 100% sure how far they can make it. I'm not going to go as far to say, a Final Four team or anything like that, but I think they've got a very well constructed, very, very promising team to make a run in this tournament that, aside from today, we haven't really talked about much, I feel like.
All right, it is time. You guys know what time it is. This is everybody's favorite segment. It is the shot clock. Everybody gets 30 seconds, just like a college basketball shot clock.
Who's going first?
Get off their best take.
Boy.
What do you guys want? I would like to go last.
You want to go last?
Personally, with my agenda, I would like to go last.
Jack, I'll leave it up to you.
All right,
first or second here.
I'll go first. I'll go first.
All
I'll
right.
lead it off here. So, go ahead and give me a clock whenever.
3, 2, 1.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and dive into the deep end right here. I think South Carolina is winning it all. I think they're winning it all. They're currently 26-0, first in the country, first in the SEC. They're leading the country. They're leading the country in blocks, which I feel like is a very crucial thing. They're not just an offensive team. They're 4th in points, 4th in field goals, 4th in 3-pointers. They're not just an offensive team, though. Like I said, 4th in blocks. This is their revenge tour. They want to face the big stars like Iowa and LSU. And I would honestly feel a little more comfortable if they would lose just one game before the tournament.
All right, got it off just in
There we
time.
go.
Just in time. And I mean, this team, just to follow up before I go on mine, I mean, this South Carolina, this program is just so great. In this era where we say, oh, it's the most parity women's college basketball has ever had. Well, we're going into another tournament where they're the favorite. I know they haven't won them all necessarily. They didn't win last year, but we're going into yet another tournament where this team is the favorite. It's going to be the third year in a row they go in as the number one overall seed. So, I mean, shout out to Dawn Staley and just the program she has built there.
I mean, like we've been saying, though, Cole, like you said earlier, they only lost one game last year.
Yeah,
and
should not have been underdogs really coming into this season.
They should have started this season off right back where they started at number one, but again, I feel like the theme of this episode is just teams that have quietly been doing successfully, it's honestly kind of crazy, so the fact that we kind of wrote them off at the beginning of the season is really kind of mind-boggling at this point in the season.
All right, Zion, you got your shot clock ready to go?
Yeah. Here we go. All right. Ohio State will be in the Final Four for the first time since 1993. Kevin McGuff has this program playing excellent basketball. They have 12 straight wins, and they clearly look like the best team in the Big Ten to me, even though we know Iowa's good. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win at Iowa on March 3rd to end the regular season, but what I am saying is that the last couple of weeks you said, oh, Michigan State, they're good. They might be able to compete. Nope. Nebraska might be able to beat Ohio State. No, this is the best team in the Big Ten, and Kevin McGuff is finally going to take the Buckeyes to the Final Four this year.
Oh,
there you go.
Might have got in time. I think you had to add your hand before the buzzer went off.
He wrapped it up there. Yeah, I think you got it.
All right, Cole. This is what we've been waiting for, man.
I just wanted to bring it home. That's why.
All right.
Here we go.
I should be way under time. I just want to continue to keep pushing women's basketball. I've seen a lot of great stuff on social media and on ESPN and everything lately. The three-point contest with Sabrina Ionescu and Steph Curry was awesome. Her hitting as many threes as any other men's player did from the NBA line was awesome.
Absolutely.
Caitlin Clark has been pushing the game in great ways. I think people who are hating on her publicizing the game is awful. She's been pushing this into the national media more than ever. Women's basketball will continue to grow. I'm here for it. I hope everybody gets out and watches some games.
Right there, right on the time.
Perfect.
Here we go. Hey, I thought those were three quality declarations or points we made. That's the point of the segment.
All right, guys, that'll do it for us. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Cole Nabi. These are my colleagues, Zion Brown, Zach Linder. Shout out to our producer, Luke Donovan, for doing a great job as always. We'll be back on Monday for the Men's Monday edition of the show. You've been listening to the Flop Warning Podcast. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. God bless.